She yells at me every time you say N.
Michael Soden.
Michael
Nebraska.
Sullivan?
State Historical Society, right?
Yes, with the Historic Preservation Department.
Yes. And then we all know Tony, he's at almost every event, so.
So we've put together just a short little presentation about historic preservation, both in the community, and invited the state to come talk as well. So Kevin will start us off with talking about the importance of historic preservation.
Okay, the importance of historic preservation is to preserve and celebrate the history of the whole city of Hastings, not just certain areas, but the whole city. Now, unfortunately, we have to break some of those into districts, okay? This is our first round of this, so we do have 4 districts picked out that we're gonna select to analyze more deeply, right?
I'll get into that more later.
Okay. The reason for that is to help foster a sense of place for the citizens, to help their input on what you feel is important, what's historical, what culturally has affected you in your city. Those things that we need to know to help create the historic districts and put those structure in those historic districts, okay? Increased property values. Once this is in place, it helps other funding mechanisms, tax credits, grants to help keep these buildings in good shape, so we don't have stuff like this over here. So, also if you create what we did in Sydney, Nebraska, we had a historic district in Nebraska, and you look down at all the historic buildings, they're all similar in nature, they're all maintained because we did facade grants, we did window grants, to maintain the historical integrity of that district. Because Sydney relies heavily on tourism to go see those sites and those structures.
Can we ask questions on one?
Yeah.
Are we, okay, as far as the windows and the facade stuff, are we already doing that here?
That's through another funding mechanism of CDB, Community Development Program, okay? This will be another funding mechanism to maintain historical integrity of the structure, the outside of that structure.
Okay.
Now, does it have to be a certain, like the building, like 80 years old or something?
We'll get into more of the specifics of that. He will. That's some of the questions you can ask him. There is some guidelines for that, okay?
Gives you some local control over that rather than relying on us.
Yes. Yeah. And then attract visitors. That's why you want people, you want everybody to come to our historic districts. And this happens to be an evolving district down here. Look at how much investment we've had in 2nd Street and 1st Street. Some of that is to create a better building, like this building, $2 million. Makes this building gonna last for a lot longer. Otherwise, what would have happened to it? It would have fell in disarray, and then somebody would have bought it for nothing and kept it for storage. Okay? So, and this, creating these historic districts helps support that investment in that district. Okay, it's a lot of steps to maintain the best things that we have in Hastings. Okay, historic preservation is one of those things.
So then, as Kevin had mentioned, there are 4 historic districts in Hastings already. These are listed at the national level on the National Register of Historic Places, as well as there's 14 different properties in the community listed on that National Historic Register. So that's just a starting point for when we start drafting our ordinance for historic districts in the community. And so having it on that national register does open those properties up to those historic tax credits, but there's no way to protect those properties because that's at the federal level. So if we create something at the local level, we could put things in place that if it's a historic structure and you don't maintain it, there's fines so that it doesn't end up getting demolished. There's different ways to do that. We haven't quite gotten into the details of that ordinance, but that's one reason to want to list properties locally rather than just at the federal level.
And we will have more public meetings once we do a rough draft of working with the state. We will do another public presentation with this, and then if there's any more input, we can adjust our ordinance to meet.
So your 4 districts is the other, is that one little one?
Yeah, so there's the downtown district, the central Hastings historic district is
Residential.
residential,
Yeah,
And
that's
there's
a
the
big-
Hartwell Park District.
Okay.
So that's both of those streets on either side of the park, and then the Hastings College, a portion of that is the
Okay, is that
district as well.
sort of my left, down towards the bottom corner? Yeah, is that one?
That's
No, so
individuals.
the pavilion in Chautauqua Park is
Oh.
listed, the park itself isn't a
Okay,
district,
just-
just that pavilion.
I see something there and I go, that-
Yeah, so each of these orange points, those are structures that have been listed individually on the historic register. The
Okay.
orange boundary is an entire district.
Okay.
What is the smaller area by the Chicago Park? The
I think
little
the
rectangle?
green is just marking.
Yeah, the green are just the parks in the city, so
Oh,
those
okay.
aren't the districts. The
Okay.
orange boundaries, those are the districts, and
districts.
the orange points are the individually
Okay.
listed properties.
Makes a little more sense.
So then that gets us into the certified local government program, which we've sort of been hinting at. So that's a partnership between the local government, the state, and the National Park Service. So I'll have them discuss that portion a little.
Yeah, I'll try to move where the camera can see. So, yes, I'm Michael Sozen with Nebraska State Historic Preservation Office, part of the State Historical Society. And this is one of the programs that we help manage in partnership with the National Park Service, Department of Interior, and then the local community. There's currently 11 communities that are certified local governments. And of course, you might sit here and think like, but isn't Hastings a certified government? It's meant that way from a preservation standpoint. So this is specific to preservation. And as you were talking about, it requires the community to pass a specific preservation ordinance. And that ordinance can be written really tailored to what the local needs are. And so, as Ember was saying, properties that are listed on the National Register of Historic Places, you might have a property that you feel is the most beautiful in town. You get it listed on the National Register of Historic Places. But as the property owner, you can get it listed today. Tomorrow, you can come in, if you get the demolition permit from the city, you can demolish it, and it can be gone. And so it also is limited on just other different aspects of what you want to do with that. And sometimes people see that as an advantage. Sometimes people see that as a disadvantage. But what being a certified local government does is it gives you more local control. You can actually develop a historic preservation ordinance. It allows you to access some grant funding. Our office receives a little over $1 million a year. 10% of that is required to go to the certified local governments on a competitive basis. They can apply for these funds. This year we're giving out $126,000, but then can be used for community planning. It can be used for some brick and mortar type projects, but really it's more for promoting your history. It's developing a cohesive, maybe it's you wanted to make that update to that website that's being used to attract people to the downtown district and maybe other historic points. It's understanding, we were talking earlier from a community planning standpoint, sometimes because the state of Nebraska is large enough, we don't have that much of a budget, and some of it's going to these communities. The last historic survey to know what is considered historic in Hastings was done in 1999, it sounded like.
Yeah.
Well, you were asking earlier, what makes a historic building? For the most part, historic buildings are anything it can potentially be buildings that are 50 years old or older. So right now, we're going back to even buildings that were built in 1975, if they are still representative examples of what that building meant to be looked like in 1975, and they tell that history, and they're part of telling that story, they can convey their significance and such, still have integrity. Those are some lofty terms that we won't necessarily get into, but if they can convey that, they can be considered to be historic resources. Well, if 1999 was the last time we looked around to see what was historic, that by itself is over 26 years ago. Well, more than that, right? Yeah, well, I guess 26 years ago. Easy math, really. But, which means we're leaving out a lot of properties that could potentially be considered historic. A community, if it wants, can add restrictions. Here, hold just one second. But don't have to. It really puts the control into the community's hands of whether they just use this as a planning tool or they use it to provide demolition protections. It usually cannot stop demolition. Or if it's being used more as a community tourism and planning or economic development. The nice thing, the last thing I'll end on, and I'll take your questions, is that it also unlocks additional incentive funds that can be used. So if we go back one slide. Right now, the only properties that are eligible to use historic incentives, this is a federal historic tax credit, there's a state historic tax credit, and there's a property tax abatement tool evaluation incentive program. The only properties that are able to use that are those little pen drops and the properties that are considered to be contributing, that are considered to be historic inside of these districts. The nice thing is, once you become a certified local government, you can get additional grant funds to develop additional historic districts, but you can also, through local ordinance, pass local historic districts. These are not recognized by the National Park Service. They don't have to go on to the National Park Service for approval. They don't have to have as much documentation. But maybe it's, I'm just speaking hypothetically, maybe it's this neighborhood over here. Looks like that would be a great neighborhood. Maybe there's more commercial buildings on the periphery of the downtown historic district that would be good candidates for redevelopment. Well, by declaring them local landmark or local historic districts, you gain access not to the federal tax credit, but you get access to both state programs. Some of those are only able to be used for commercial type ventures. Some can be used for single family homes, but it does give you more access to incentive funds and some grant funding to be able to leverage things. So hopefully that gives a little bit more of a sense. But I know you had a question.
Yeah, early on you said that I don't know if I heard it quite right. You said you could buy a building, get it registered on the National Historic Registry, and the next day you could get a permit and tear it down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The National Register of Historic Places does not provide any protection. It's honorary.
Okay.
Okay? And so, as a community, a lot of times communities have these landmarks that are very important to them. You have a downtown, you have residential neighborhoods that are important to the fabric of your community, right? They convey who we are. Where do we usually have parades, and where do people go and take their senior photos and things like that? What's usually that postcard image of your community? Usually they're historic places. Maybe that's a pavilion in the park. Maybe it's a downtown. Maybe it's a very unique, architecturally significant church or other things like that, right? But right now, the National Register of Historic Places is only honorary. Someone could acquire that property, and this is not necessarily a bad thing. We want property owners to have property rights. That's definitely the goal, but at the same time, if you have a certified local government, you can try to guide through your own local ordinance potential protections, or being able to say, hey, everyone knows that this is a historic building. If you buy this building, that's great. We hope you'll do great things. We hope you'll be successful. But here's a couple little added things. If you decide you want to tear down this building, you have to justify why it needs to be torn down. Or maybe it's that it's delayed for 30 days or something like that, which gives the community a chance to say, hey, wait, I find this building to be important. Or someone else to step in and say, you may not want that building, but I'm willing to invest in that building. It can provide opportunity for the community to take control of what that future is of its historic places. And it's not really the demolition controls. Frankly, that doesn't get used very often. Occasionally buildings come down, right? Historic buildings, you guys have had fires. You've had other things. It doesn't stop a building that needs to come down from coming down, because you can't say that.
Basically, it does make a lot of sense to go to work to get it historical, and it's not going to tear it down.
It doesn't, but the thing
it can
is,
be done.
it could be done.
Yeah.
The other thing is it also gives you a seat at the table. If there is a large, let's say, this is a federal highway that comes through town, and they want to widen that highway even wider than what it is. It means that your community should already be considered has a heightened level of being a consulting party. Your historic resources have to be taken under consideration for federal projects, and that you have more of a voice. So that's another thing it does. Again, it just means that your community, it won't happen a lot, but it means that your community, if a sticky situation develops, means that everyone's supposed to take a breath, take a step back, work together, try to find the best solution, and then move forward. It doesn't stop progress. Sometimes it helps catalyst progress with the incentive tools and things like that. But it's meant to try to provide a little extra community involvement, community voice in identifying what is historic and funneling resources or protections as they see fit to what are then deemed historic properties.
So once you have this come through, you have and you own this historic building, is there any restrictions as far as how you remodel it, upgrade it, do you have to make it look like it did 100 years ago when the building was built, or can you make it look very modern?
So just to give you a sense of things, to answer your question directly, the simple answer is it depends, because it depends on how you structure that ordinance. How you guys as a community decide to write that ordinance. It can be very bare bones. It can be more involved, that it potentially has those restrictions, but it's up to you guys as a community. I have no idea what the intended goal is for Hastings and that.
The city council?
Yeah, it'll go
Yeah,
through planning commission.
that's
and
something
city
we
council.
haven't started drafting yet at this point in time, so once we do start drafting that, like Kevin said, we'll have more public engagement meetings, it'll go to planning commission, go to council, and then we would put something into place.
But that being said, for us, so like these incentive tools. So let's say, a building like this one right here is vacant, it's underutilized, and someone would like to see, someone wants to buy it, or someone already owns it, and they're saying, man, I know I can use this building for a greater purpose. Let's say it's currently just outside of this boundary, it's just outside of the line, and it's this building right here. With these grant funds, you could get it listed to the National Register, or by local ordinance, you could get it listed as a local landmark. So if this building is now a local landmark, does not necessarily, it may or may not have local restrictions, but let's say you apply, you're now the owner, and you apply for the incentive programs. There are rules you have to follow. It's not just free money, right?
Yeah.
So if you want the incentive program, in exchange for those dollars, you have to follow what's called the standards, the Department of Interior Standards for Rehabilitation. They're fairly broad, but the idea is that they are not trying to turn back the clock of time. It's not, hey, this building was built in 1924, therefore it needs to look exactly like it did in 1924. And let's be honest, I'm not sure what this building was, maybe a department store, something like that. It doesn't have to go back to that same use, right? We expect that our historic buildings are going to change use over time. Look at one of the projects that went through our office and passed the Secretary of Interior Standards for Rehabilitation is your brewery. The former brewery warehouse that's now brewery lofts on the outside edge of downtown. It's got that really big, tall brick chimney on it. So it used to be a big wholesale brewery. I can't remember if it was like Pabst or Budweiser. I can't remember. It was an off-brand, okay. I couldn't remember which. But it's now become apartments. So here it was a manufacturing facility that put out kegs and kegs of beer and bottles of beer, and now it's people's homes.
Yeah.
So when some people say that, oh man, historic preservation gets to be restrictive and it keeps me from changing the building and it doesn't let me do these things. It went from an industrial use to being someone's kitchen and living room and bedroom that they are proud to call their home. It didn't have to stay a very rustic, dirty, industrial warehouse and manufacturing facility. So these buildings, we expect them to change quite a bit on the inside. Now, obviously, there's certain things that we see as historic character. There's certain things about windows that we want to have maintained. We don't want you to start popping in all sorts of new window openings. Maybe a few is okay. We don't want to try to make the windows much smaller or go with just the cheapest vinyl window that's going to have to be replaced in 10 years. We want it to be, when you look at it from the street, you're like, but man, I bet that building was built in, maybe it was built in the 1920s. Wow. Oh, I can tell it was historic. I bet it was maybe a department store. Oh, you want it to be able to convey what its history was, but you also want it to be used for whatever the community wants it to be used for today. And so that's what the standards are designed to be. Any restrictions that the community places are hopefully in line with, they're supposed to use those standards, which is not, I just don't like the color green. I don't think they should paint it green. That should not be part of the rules. Now, that being said, there are certain architectural features that paint colors sometimes do come into play, but typically colors and cosmetic tastes are not part of our process. It's usually, can the building convey its story? Are we slowing down that march of time where it's still recognizable, yet is it flexible enough to allow it to be what it needs to be for modern and future purposes? So that's the main goal.
So you had right after that old building been sitting around for years.
Yep.
Not being used for anything. Basically almost condemned.
Yep.
Roof leaking, okay, City Hall. Roof leaking, the foundation shot, water's getting in, everything else. That would be one that you could put on the historic register, and then you'd be eligible to get funds to help fix all that.
Potentially. Yes, potentially. So, for example, something that I was here about a year ago. You guys have a large school just north of the downtown.
Yeah, we're middle school.
Not Lincoln, that's
Still middle school.
like
Right?
up the street on.
Longfellow.
Yeah,
Oh,
Longfellow.
okay.
Yeah.
But there was that large school. Well, it's old enough. Most of it's over 50 years old, right? But yet it's this large vacant structure that's sitting there.
For the middle school.
I think it's the middle school, because I don't think I'm talking about the Longfellow's Hall. That was
Yeah,
listed to the
that's
National
still-
Register recently.
That's still being used,
No.
yeah.
But there's the school, and I don't think it's,
Middle school,
is it here maybe? I'm not sure.
No,
It's a
that's
large
Mary
building.
Lanning's
What's
7th
that?
Street. It's
Yeah.
this
Oh, this big building
right
right, okay. So yeah, so let's just use that school as an example, because it was asked of our office, would it qualify potentially for incentive programs, and could it be considered historic, capital H historic? We can look at it, we can all go, that looks like a historic building, but is it officially historic? Is it on the National Register of Historic Places, or is it a local landmark as a result of a CLG, a local historic preservation ordinance? So let's just say that if you guys already had this ordinance passed, you already had it figured out. City council meeting, say the next meeting is next Monday. They could, if that ordinance is written up, they could document with proper documentation, say that the school is now a local historic landmark. It's a local historic landmark because of X, Y, and Z reasons. They tell a little bit of its history. They now pass that ordinance. The next day, they could apply for the state historic incentive, the state historic tax credit. 30% of the anticipated expenditures to fix that building could be could be claimed as a credit, reserved, and they could also use other different. They could pair, maybe it's tax increment financing, or maybe it's our valuation incentive program, or they can apply for other different grants if they so chose, or maybe the developer says, that's enough. And then they're gonna take that from a school to an apartment.
Very well.
What?
You don't know developers very well.
Well, I get to work with them all the time. They
You
usually
never have
do,
enough.
but it depends upon the cost of that project, right?
I'm sorry, I should have interrupted.
But you're right, because that building has been sitting vacant enough, and its transformation would be massive, right? We're talking, I don't know, that could be a $10 million project. That could be a
Slide
20
it
million.
for 15.9.
Okay, so I was about to say, I bet it's somewhere between 10 and 20 million. It's just where, if I had to guess, just by its size, it's been over a year since I've walked around it. That's an example. Now, it doesn't mean that it has to go through historics, right? It doesn't have to go through our historic tax credits. There's some ideas of what they want to do for conversion of that space that may not meet the standards. They wanted to maybe take the roof off some areas, add additional stories. Some things don't always qualify and don't work within the historic incentive programs. What I'm saying is, without having to go through the federal government, without having to do anything else, you guys as a local community can take your own future destiny into your hands, following the parameters of what is historic preservation, and take a property like that, have it become a local landmark, and immediately it is now eligible for most of the incentive programs that are out there. So it allows you guys to be much more nimble and to be able to respond to local needs without having to go through an 8-month, 9-month, 10-month, 18-month process to get it listed on the National Register or other things like that. Now, we'd love to see more things on the National Register. Sometimes things become a local landmark, and then they become National Register later.
Is there any guidelines or anything? I mean, let's just use the bill scope. A little bit I know about it, but get right, I don't know very much about it. We were told a few weeks ago, we saw that there's a developer here wanting to work on it. Was gonna sink $15 million into it, including some test money. And if you got done, it's only worth $9 million.
It's possible.
Now, to me, that's a waste of money because the things are worth what you put into it. Now, is there any guidelines to hold your funds out of there, because I don't like wasting taxpayers' money.
So
I mean, what keeps someone from putting?
So keep in mind, if that building gets torn down, who's gonna potentially be stuck paying that bill? Is it gonna be the local taxpayers?
But it's like it costs us $6 million to do it.
But you were talking about there's only a $3 million bill.
$9 million is what it's gonna be
Okay.
worth. He's
50.
putting $15 million into it. I'm going.
Yeah.
That's $6 million. You're in the red
It
right
can
off the
be.
bat.
Remember, that's the proposed tax value of $1 million.
So,
But it's
We
open
can't
market.
guess what the county is going to assess that structure as.
so look at it.
The cost of the project is slated for 50, will it cost that? We don't know until the project's done, like this one. We
Right.
wanted 7 million,
Oh, yeah, but-
we're at 8.
What I'm getting at is, I would hate to see basically money flushed out of the drain.
And
To me,
this is all I can say, because I'm not gonna tell you how things should be done locally. But it puts more control locally to make that decision. So you guys, as members of the public, members of the city, can work more together using this ordinance and say, hey, is this building important to us? And if the answer is yes, well, how important to us is it? And now you guys are armed with a few more tools to decide, is it now, then you can have the conversation. Is this a good idea? But without having the tools available to you, it makes it even harder to decide if this is a good idea, because there's no additional support, there's no pathways to success, right? So this is just trying to give you the quote unquote, putting more tools in your toolbox, when you run into a project issue, you know that you've got more options.
That's what it was after. In other words, you would have it, use you as the guy that funnels the money in from the state or the federal. Can say, no, this isn't worth it. We're not going to put this money into it because it's really not.
And first, we don't make that decision. If a person says, hey, look, we're gonna come and spend $15 million, the only thing that we ask is that for the state incentive program, are you spending at least $5,000? For our valuation incentive program, are you spending at least 25% of the building's property tax value in improvements? For the federal side, it's around that 25% of its value. Are you at least enhancing its value by at least 25%? Because what its value is today, we know it's going to be worth more afterwards if you do a quality project on it. And so whether or not a developer loses money or someone else loses money is not, we don't make that call. If you're willing, if whoever's applying is willing to spend that money, this is the fixed amount that we're willing to provide in exchange, so long as they do what they say they're going to do, and they do that meeting historic preservation standards, then here's what we can provide and support. Because the hope is that it creates housing, it creates jobs, it creates places for business, it saves the land market, You know, it's those types of things that we're after.
So you're not evaluating risk, you're just.
We don't evaluate risk. That, we leave that to whoever the property owner is, whoever the people who are putting their, you know, who are basically the ones that are signing over that loan or whatever else, the people who are assuming the most of the risk, it's them that have to assume that risk. We don't tell them what that risk is. Now, there are times that we say, hey, we're looking at this thing, and we try to be good stewards, and we say, there was a person not that long ago that purchased an old school building out in a rural area, and that renovation cost was going to be in the millions of dollars. The business they were going to get put in there in a rural community was not going to generate close to $1 million a year. It was going to take decades for that return on investment. But for that community, that building was important enough that they said, we want this project to happen. It's not always about dollars and cents. Sometimes it's about that sense of place. Not everything comes down to dollars and cents, but we leave that decision into the hands of the people doing the project in the local community.
You might be referring to Potter, Nebraska. The Legion donated a building to the village of Potter because they couldn't afford to keep it up anymore. Well, Potter tried to use their own cash reserves to fix it up. Well, they realized they couldn't afford to do that. So what do? They created a historic district, created a historic building, and they used some funds to help bring that building back to its glory of providing services to that community.
You were successful?
Yes.
Yeah.
It struggled there for a while, but after I left, they completed the project, they did everything, and now it's a community hall. And the Legion people still get to use it for the meetings. So,
And this thing, we're not trying to pick necessarily winners and losers.
Right.
You know, we're just, if someone says, hey, I'm willing to spend this money to save a historic structure or to enhance a historic structure, we're willing to come in and say, look, we're gonna stand beside you within the parameters of state or federal law, and obviously whatever local, and this is where we can provide our support. We're willing to put support because we believe that historic places have value to the state of Nebraska, to your local communities, and we're willing to stand beside you within the bounds of the law to do so.
Okay.
So what happens if they say they're gonna do something with it and then they don't?
So the thing is, with the historic incentives, they don't get a check up front. They only get a check after they've finished the project and done it according to plan. Now, we all know that with historic buildings, things don't always go according to plan. So we do have an amendment process that's reasonable, and then you get into the building and, oh my goodness, this wall is, a great example is the Plattsmouth School. It's an old high school in Plattsmouth, Nebraska. It's sat vacant for over 40 years. When they started working on some of the masonry on one of the wall collapsed. They had to pick up brick by brick, put it back up there. They were happy to do that. Obviously, it took a little bit of a process. It changed their plan. They had to redo some things to make it structurally safe for everybody. We were happy to work with them. So it changed the plans, but they did not get $1 until after that project was certified. And we said, yes, you did what you said you were going to do. We can then come in, certify that project. It then goes on, and that's when they get the tax credits. So those dollars don't come in until after they've shown proof of accomplished project, at least for the historic incentives.
Is there a timeline that is it 5 years, 2 years?
There
Favorite
is.
project?
It's different for each one of the programs, and we can get into those weeds, but
No, I just want to make sure that I didn't apply for it and 20 years later finish it up and hey, where's my money
so like the federal incentives, you have an option before you get started. You have to say that you're going to take the credits. You don't have necessarily a timeline. You have a 24-month window that you can say, my expenses I incurred within this 24-month window will be the ones that now qualify for credits. Or at the beginning, before you start the project, you can say, this is going to be a phased project. It's going to take me a long time. And then we give you 64 months. So you have the option of 24-month window or 64-month window, okay? State program. It does eventually sunset, and there's other different things, so you have a certain amount of time, but reasonably, we say please get it completed within 2 years from the time you start work, but if you need to file an extension, you can do so. Same with the valuation incentive program. It is, you have 2 years from the time you are approved to start work and finish it. But if you need more time, if you can justify why, you can communicate to us, we can provide an extension.
If they don't have a very good justification, you say.
And a lot of times we say, if you haven't even started work and you're like, well, you know, the economy's gotten rough and things have been tight, it's like, that's fine. Withdraw this application. When you're ready, come back and reapply. We're happy to be there with you at that time.
Yeah.
That's usually what it becomes about.
Yeah, there's a lot of safeguards in place to protect their money, state money, and
Because it's all of our money.
Which is our money.
it's our money in that case, but yes, yeah.
So on there, are there any houses on there that are historical?
Yeah, so this house is listed individually, it's, in that district as well as this whole district. There are multiple houses in that district that are contributing to that district. Same with this one, there's multiple houses along, both of those streets that are contributing to that district as well.
So that, can they apply for funds now?
Yeah, so these are on the national register, so those would be
But
able
it
to
would
apply
be
for those
national
tax
funds.
credits.
So,
Yeah,
so just
whoops.
for those properties that are commercial, they qualify for all 3 programs. If there's, let's say there's an apartment building that's in here, that's a commercial enterprise, it can qualify for all 3 programs. But if it's an owner-occupied, single-family house, it only qualifies for the valuation incentive program. So, unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, depending upon your perspective, obviously, the state of Nebraska only has 1 program that's available for owner-occupied, single-family homes. Okay.
And you say it's the evaluation, what was it?
Valuation incentive program.
And that
So
is in a short.
in a short phrase, you say that you're going to do the work, it has to meet at least 25% of the value of the home. But so let's say the house is worth $100,000. So long as you're spending $25,000 in improvements, you can then qualify. Once you've completed the project, you get 8 years that your property taxes are frozen. So if it was worth $125,000, the county says it was worth $100,000, it stays at that valuation of $100,000 for 8 years. And then years 9, 10, 11, and 12, it stair steps up in valuation. So in year 12, let's say it's now worth $160,000. You're slowly working that up from year 8 to year 12. You're stair stepping your way up in valuation. So it reduces your property tax that are owed in exchange for you improving a historic property.
Okay.
What if that house is sold and somebody else
It
moves in?
transfers to the new one.
So, and if they wanna do something, they can take 25% again?
That's a good question. So one of the restrictions, one of the protections is if you want to, so once you've entered into the program, any major changes to the building, now if it's, hey, the toilet cracked and I wanted to replace the toilet, that's whatever. If you're just replacing carpet, or repainting the walls, you're changing out a light fixture, no big deal, right? But if you're making substantial changes to that building, then there's an amendment process. We just say, talk to us, get our permission, because you're still gaining the benefits. Now, at the end of that 12 years, you decide you want to apply for it again, you're doing another renovation to that house, you can reapply yet again. Most of the other programs only have a 5-year period. The federal and the state historic tax credit, they're just a 5-year period. So at the end of 5 years, there's 0 restrictions. The property is now completely free, clear. You can do whatever you want to that property. But you can also, after a year of having that credit, you can reapply again. So even if you're still within that 5-year period, you could say, hey, I finished the first floor, but I never had the money to do the second floor of the downtown. I wanted to put apartments up there. You could then apply again and do it kind of in stair-stepped in phases as you have the financial wherewithal to do it, or the sweat equity, or whatever you want to put into it. So it's not meant to stifle development. Again, if someone does that in the downtown building or wherever, within the next 5 years after they complete it, if they're doing something major, we ask that they let us know that we check it off. Usually it's just oh yeah, you need to, you know, you that one area you never put apartments in, you want to do that? Do you want to use our incentive program? No, I've saved up enough money, it's just a small project. Okay, great, you know, that sounds good. Tell us how you're gonna do it. Okay, yep, that works. Sign off, you're good to go. So we're not trying to stop people from doing continued improvements, it's just to be stewards of the taxpayer dollars that were given to them, we want to make sure that you don't, like you said, it's kind of like the thing of, if you get the thing on the National Register, you're probably not going to demolish it the next year, but crazy things happen, properties get sold, there's a 5-year restriction just to say, hey look, you can't undo the work that the taxpayers helped provide you. After that period of time is gone, unless there's local laws saying otherwise, you can do, it's your property, you can do whatever you want to it.
Yeah.
So,
Maybe we can beat that one to death, didn't it?
yeah, but and that's the thing, right? It's a voluntary program.
Yeah.
So, you know, people can obviously do what they want to property. If they're not using our programs, they don't have to come and ask us our opinion. But if they want to use our programs, then there are safeguards put in place just to ensure that those programs are being used for their intended purpose. We don't want waste and fraud and other things, you know, with these programs. We want them to be used for their intended purpose.
The historic district with Hartwell Park, does that go past 9th Street? Or is that just, or is it in at 9th Street?
So 9th Street is right here, 12th Street is right
Okay.
here, so it's just Forest
Boulevard
Boulevard and
and
Lakeside
Lakeside
Drive,
Boulevard,
just
yeah.
those two.
Yeah, just when I used to have a house on 9th Street there, you go, it'd be nice to get some funds on that.
I know, yeah.
That's right.
But yeah, so, but if you want to go back, advance the slide back to this, so, or whoops,
Other way?
other way, I think, there we go. So these are currently the communities that are certified local governments. Obviously Omaha and Lincoln are the big ones, but you'll start to see this is, you know, Plattsmouth and several others. Ogallala is soon to be joining this program. You know, like communities like Beatrice have been talking about it. I'm trying to remember who else. There's a few others. This one actually is missing a couple of our more recent ones. Oh no, it does. It actually does have Hebron. Never mind. I was like, wait, Hebron and Neely, but they're both on there. So we do have several other communities that are looking at this.
So what is the process once you apply? Does it take very long to?
It kind of moves at the speed that.
So there's
Your
a couple
community.
steps that we have to go through. So like we said, there's that ordinance that we have to create. We have to put together a historic preservation commission. And then, like you said, then after we go through the process, we could do another updated historic property survey. Public education is an important part of the certified local government. So the main parts are putting together that ordinance and that historic preservation commission. So
Now,
however long that takes us to draft that and put that
So
together.
how many people will be on that commission?
I'm thinking 8.
I think it was 9 is the template that we got. I'd have to look back at that, and that's something
And
that
that would be some of the citizens of Hastings?
Yes,
would be the citizens.
And hopefully, some within some of these districts, we want some representation from these districts.
And
then-
plus with that preservation commission, it's important to have people that know about, so like the experts, so like a realtor or like an architect or some of those types of people as well. So in Lincoln, for example, they have a historic preservation architect on their commission. We're obviously a smaller community, so we may not have all of those experts that they do, but generally it's a good idea to have some of those experts on your commission as well.
And so the areas of expertise that they want you to aspire to is someone that knows history, someone that knows architecture, someone that understands construction trades and things like that, because especially if you do have any design standards, someone's like, hey, I really want to do this. They can at least reasonably look at something and tell that. I'm trying to think what else. Archaeology is one that they suggest, but to be honest, most of our communities don't have an archaeologist.
If you're looking at Hebron, Red Cloud, Fairbury, Auburn, Neely, they're all really small towns, so is it a there's no way you're gonna get a architect with this, if you're
Not
really
necessarily,
lucky.
you'd be surprised.
might
It
be
doesn't,
some-
yeah, you'd be quite surprised. So I used to live in the village of Steel City. So
Yeah,
right down here between Beatrice and Fairbury on the Kansas-Nebraska line, population 55. We were looking at becoming a CLG at one point. This is before I was with the state. And we actually had an architect that lived in our village. And so, village of 55, and they were a retired architect.
yeah.
They were no longer licensed and practicing, but they had that training and skill. And what was really funny was there was 3 of us with history and historic preservation type backgrounds in there. So we were like, wow, we could actually fill out a board and have it without having to get exemptions to have special exemptions saying that we couldn't find the expertise in a town of 55 people. So I'm pretty sure you guys in the community of Hastings, and I think it allows you to even people that are like, even if they don't necessarily live directly in Hastings, if they live just outside, if they're like 2 miles outside of Hastings, you know, if they have a vested interest in your community and your community sees them as having expertise.
So you could draw from Judy at Glenville's in a different county, but it doesn't matter if they're in a different county, does it?
Counties can become CLGs themselves.
No, I
and
mean,
it doesn't-
if Hastings wanted to do this, you could draw from Glenville, they're in a different county, does that
I
matter?
don't think the law used to be a little bit more narrowly written. It has been opened up some, that you guys have local control as a community to decide who is considered to be able to represent Hastings on this historic preservation
And
commission.
that's something that would be part of that ordinance as well, as we have to write the rules
Figure it
as
out.
to how many people are on it, of what their expertise have to be, so that's something we haven't started drafting, but once we get to that point, then
Yeah,
it's, yeah, something we consider.
yeah.
So this will take several months to get
Yes,
started.
yes.
Yeah.
We're just trying to finish up the process that was started last year.
Again, yeah, we've seen some communities get this done in a matter of months. We've seen others that take multiple years as they just just depends upon what factors are at.
Depends on who's driving it.
Well, Amber and I are driving, and it's not the only bus we're driving.
Yes, I was about to say. We want it to be one of those tools in your toolbox, but you're trying to maintain
Yes.
all those tools in your toolbox, right?
Yes.
You know, it can be a challenge, but.
Now, is there grants available, since we're not a CLG yet, to do historic surveys, to get our list of structures? Because I know in Sydney, we applied for CLG grants
Yes.
to do
A lot of that.
surveys.
Yeah, Sydney has been very active over the years. So for example, Neely, when they were getting certified, we knew that they were well on the path to be a certified local government, get permission by the National Park Service, saying, yep, you meet all the standards, you do all the things. But that ordinance wasn't gonna get passed till like 2-3 months after the grant cycle. So they were able to submit a grant, it was conditionally approved, that if they failed to get that passed, there would be no money for them. But so we're willing to try to work if we're getting close. The next grant cycle will be next summer. Those next grants, it's based on the federal fiscal year, so it would start October 1 would be the next period of time.
Because those studies go from $20,000 to $40,000.
They really do. There's always a small element of at least 20% local
Depending on how many
match.
structures are in your
It
district.
really can. There's usually at least a 20% local match. We can try to talk about things. Our budget, just with things that have been going on the federal and state side, has been held flat for the last 5 years. So our ability to do some projects outside of the CLGs right now is very limited. And so, especially because a significant amount of our funds right now, we're trying to put at least 12.5% to 13% a year of the funds we receive
less
go
than
to the
20,
CLGs.
I can't remember, is it
126,
how much match, is it 20%?
20%.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it's an 80-20, with us picking up 80% of the
When
work.
we do the budget for the 26-27 year, I will have to put in 20%
Yeah, yeah.
into capital.
And I would say, if you have the ability, because sometimes we have more requests than we have dollars. Especially some of the communities that ask for much larger sections of the pie, Lincoln and
Yeah,
Vermont,
you know.
there are times that we say, hey, look, we can only pay 60% of the projects you're looking at doing. Are you okay with that? And they can either remove projects or, say, yeah, we have a thing. So from a planning standpoint, if you can plan for a 25% match or something like that, it's just smarter.
Because that's gonna be our biggest first step, is to create that survey and get a list of
Yes.
historic
Yeah.
structures, or contributing structure generally.
And I can't speak, it's a committee that reviews these. Any of the eligible projects are out there, but things that are using this as a planning tool towards economic development are seen better than just the heritage tourism. So if you're saying, hey, I just wanna put up a walking tour with the markers, that's wonderful. We wanna help support that. However, if dollars are really tight, and someone else is saying, look, we want to list this building to the National Register because we know that it can create, next year, we're gonna then approve a development there that's gonna put in 60 new housing units. You doing that update to your website or putting in a marker downtown compared to us supporting that is going
Not
to
as
score.
contributing to maintaining the historical integrity of that building.
So there you do basically run out, which I'm assuming you do every year, run out of money.
Yep.
You
We have to pick
You
and
guys
choose.
basically decide, you gotta decide with your committees who is eligible for what you do have.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
And
if Hastings
that's-
puts in for $5 million and you only have $1 million, and we say, no, we want it all.
Then you may not get anything.
We might get anything.
And that's the possibility. If you're entering this program solely for the access to grant funds, it's probably not the right reason, okay? Because again, there's $126,000 for the entire state of Nebraska, just specifically for CLGs. Now, I will say, communities that are CLGs, communities that are designated Nebraska Main Street communities, those, if we do apply for additional grants, and occasionally we get an extra $400,000 to do in state aid. So when we get those communities that are CLGs and those communities that are certified Main Street communities, they get bonus points. Now, those points aren't significant, super significant, but if it comes down to, I've only got enough money for the top 6 communities, 6 projects in the state of Nebraska. Boy, projects 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 all scored basically the exact same. That extra couple points on our rubric for being a CLG or being a part of the Main Street program could be the difference in one of your projects in your community getting $100,000 or getting $25,000 or $30,000 compared to getting 0. So I will say that's occasionally comes into play. We've had occasionally, but that being part of a CLG is essentially the tiebreaker, and that's the decision maker.
Right. Yeah, get the CLG part, what's a Main Street program?
So, in the
I
past,
guess what's the differences?
so it's a totally different type of program. Your guys' downtown Hastings, I can't remember, is it Merchants Association? I don't know. But also, there's downtown Hastings, that's also a CRA, and it's part of, it's kind of a mixture of different things. For a while, it was an associate Main Street community. Main Street it's a subsidiary of the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and it is a program that's designed for communities to take a lead on downtown economic development.
Okay.
So it's very downtown specific, trying to leverage downtowns for economic growth, historic preservation, promotion, a variety of different things like
I
that.
just haven't heard of that.
Yeah, Hastings has been associated within Main
Yeah.
Street circles for a while,
Yeah.
but they are not a certified designated Main Street
How many
community.
certified Main Street? I've been out of the loop for a little while. I know Alliance
Sydney
was.
used to be.
Sydney used to be, and Alliance used to be, but I think they
So-
lost that designation.
So the National Main Street increased the requirements. It's become a higher bar to achieve right now. Beatrice and Fremont, I believe, are the only 2 fully designated. There are some others that are a step below that. It's Falls City, Wayne, North Platte, that I think also qualify And then there's several others that are different levels below that they're trying to, oh my gosh, which one is it? Wake? Yeah, there's another one in a really smaller town that's actually within that fold too.
So this would be the certified, I'm gonna go to more minute with it, certified CLG?
Certified
Local government, okay.
Yeah, CLG is much easier to
Yeah,
read.
alright, certified local government.
It's a horrible name.
Is there
Big
a,
numbers.
is a certification, for so many years? And we have to redo it again, or is it for,
So we do go and we make an annual visit that
Okay.
meets with your Historic Preservation Commission, your HPC, and we recertify essentially. Now, if
so
you
every
guys-
year they get recertified?
there is a recertification. It's pretty easy. We've had some communities that frankly kind of go dormant for a while. Plattsmouth, when they were dealing with all the Missouri River floods. The Historic Preservation Commission, wasn't that it wasn't important, but there's only so much energy that city staff and local people could put into it. They had to pause then. We did not remove their certification. We just said, hey, once you guys are ready to